Hello, Year 12 Global Politics. Today we will be looking at the impact on state sovereignty, and we'll be specifically looking at regional groupings, contested borders, and issues that require multilateral resolutions. There are other challenges that you may look at throughout this area of study that will challenge the state sovereignty. So intergovernmental organisations can challenge a state. Non-state actors can also challenge the state, like Islamic State. Every time they carry out an attack, that will challenge the effective control of the state. And finally, transnational corporations. So there are multiple challenges that states will face when it comes to their sovereignty. However, those are the three that we will be looking at. And finally, the skill that you need to be confident with here is to analyse the challenges facing state sovereignty. Your teachers will probably tell you that analyse means you need to break it down. So how I would break it down is looking at what, how, and why. What is the challenge? How does it challenge a state's sovereignty? And why is it a challenge to a state's sovereignty? So there you go. They are the skills. Well, that is the skill, and these are the knowledge that we are going to be looking at. So let's look at our first keyword, which is sovereignty. In order to understand challenges to state sovereignty, we need to know what it actually means. And it is that you have legitimate or a widely recognised ability to exercise control within that area. So sometimes though in order for a state really to have sovereignty, they need to be recognised. And it is the organising principle of global politics. Without sovereignty, states can't really exist or represent themselves. States will represent themselves in the United Nations, and that really demonstrates that they actually have sovereignty. So, state sovereignty can be challenged internally with secessionist groups like in China, it would be groups like the Uyghurs, or it could be externally. So when one state invades another, we could say at the moment that Russia invading Ukraine is definitely an external challenge to Ukraine's sovereignty, because it means that they won't be able to exercise effective control within that area. I would, when talking about sovereignty, try to go back to some of these key words, that it's legitimate or widely recognised. They're unable to exercise effective control. Those would be words I would go back to when discussing sovereignty and the challenges that states have in this area. So our first challenge is a regional grouping. Regional groupings are when states will join an area, join the grouping based on their geographical location. So the EU is one because every country in Europe, that is classified as being part of Europe, are part of the EU. All the countries that are recognised as being part of Africa are part of the African League. So there are regional groupings based on your geographical area. Broadly speaking, though, regional groupings can challenge a state's sovereignty because they exercise authority at a higher level than the state, quashing the state's ability with their sovereignty to exercise control over their territory. So groups like the EU will operate at a higher level than the states. With the EU, they are a supranational organisation which holds authority above the levels of the states in the European region. So, operating above the level of the state, they will create policies and directives that member states must follow and actually need to adopt with their own state legislation. We've seen this with the EU, that when they sign a treaty, it means then that states that are part of the EU must also be part of that treaty or be following what the EU does in that area. So the EU is a signatory to the 1951 Refugee Convention, so that means states must follow that treaty as well. If states don't follow what the EU does, they can be taken to the European Court of Justice, and if they have been found to actually have disobeyed that law, they can be fined. And the national laws that are in conflict with the EU law will be abolished, and priority must be given to the EU law. So they must comply with the EU, meaning then that the EU is infringing on the political sovereignty of the state, or in some cases could also be infringing on the economic sovereignty of the state, because they must follow what the EU does, which challenges their effective control over that particular area. We have seen the EU challenge the power of Hungary in 2019 when they took Hungary to the Court of Justice for making it illegal for citizens to assist refugees. Because the EU have signed the Refugee Convention, this meant that Hungary had to follow the directives of the EU, and they couldn't make decisions about refugees that would contradict the 1951 Refugee Convention. So, therefore, this shows that the EU, as a regional grouping, is challenging the political sovereignty of Hungary. Hungary aren't able to make political decisions about refugees that will contradict the laws of the EU. However, we need to remember that states can choose to join these groupings and can also choose to leave them. So if they don't like what is being agreed to in the EU, they can leave. And we did see this in the UK when they decided to leave the EU. So it's up to states whether or not they actually want their sovereignty to be infringed. Okay, our next challenge to a state's sovereignty is contested borders. And the one that we will look at is the South China Sea. There are lots of different examples you could look at, but this is the one that I will be focusing on. Broadly speaking, sovereignty can be challenged by contested borders as the ability of the government to control their perceived territory is weakened by conflict. If states believe that the area belongs to them and not the other, that can challenge states because it means that they will then be, in conflict with each other and could actually draw them into more serious disputes as well. In terms of why the South China Sea, though, is important, I think that's something that we all need to kind of understand in order to discuss the challenges that they face in this area. So the South China Sea is economically quite important because 1/3 of the world's shipping goes through that area. There's $3 trillion worth of trade in that area, as well as it being rich with natural resources such as oil and gas. So it's important for economic sovereignty for states. So that's also kind of driving states in this area. But also there are states like China who believe that they have a historical claim to that area. So China claims that area belongs to them because of the 9-dash line. So their history. They have said that they will, safeguard this territory and that it's part of their territorial integrity. It's an inalienable part of Chinese territory. And this has become more apparent because they believe that this territory is theirs because they are now establishing islands in that area and then militarizing those islands. So they now have 12 military bases in the South China Sea. Therefore, they believe that territory then is theirs. It's their sovereign bases. And they also passed a law that the National Coast Guard could fire on foreign vessels if they threaten China's national sovereignty in the South China Sea. So they genuinely believe that this territory is theirs. However, other states also lay claim to that area. China, Vietnam, the Philippines, and Malaysia all lay claim to the Spratly Islands. And therefore, all these states then are having their territory and their sovereignty challenged because they can't now exercise control or maintain their borders and territory because they could be in conflict with others, or those other states also believe it's theirs. We have seen, though, China's actual sovereignty in this area be challenged. Not just China threatening and, intimidating its neighbours, but their sovereignty has also been challenged in this area. This kind of started with the Court of Arbitration ruling that China did not have control over this area. And, that there legally says then that China doesn't have control over the area. So that could be, a legal challenge to their sovereignty. But we've also seen other challenges. It's kind of started really in 2021, again, with the Filipino foreign minister telling China to get the F out of their territory. And it's also led to the US and the Philippines having war games in the South China Sea. And this is impacting China's sovereignty because it means then that now they have a hostile neighbour, which then also impacts their regional relationships with another state. So, yeah, it really then is impacting China's ability to exercise control in this area, in their inalienable territory, because it means that there are other states, operating in this area and also potentially intimidating China in this area. So, when talking about South China Sea, it's important to recognise both sides. That China is intimidating other states, which is then impacting their political sovereignty, through their threatening and intimidating behaviour, militarising the area, but also that China's sovereignty has been challenged, starting with the decision in the Court of Arbitration and further on with hostilities in the South China Sea, with war games and, their I guess the other side kind of responding to China. Finally, we have issues that require multilateral resolutions, and the issue we will be focusing on is climate change. Issues that require multilateral resolutions can challenge state sovereignty due to it involving global actors intervening to find resolutions to a crisis. Now, climate change is considered an issue that impacts states because it means they can't exercise effective control over a population. They may need to compromise on economic or political policies to resolve the issue, which infringes on their ability to control economically and politically what's going on in their state, because they have to follow what's being said in this multilateral resolution. But also, climate change as an issue also challenges state sovereignty because it is a existential threat. It isn't something tangible. So it does mean that some states, are at the mercy of others to actually resolve the issue. Small Pacific Island states are seeing issues like rising sea levels, damage to their fish stocks, and destructive weather events. And they can't just resolve this issue by themselves. They need the world to kind of be helping with this issue. The issue of climate change extends beyond the borders of one state. So, states then, to solve this issue of climate change, signed on to the Paris Climate Agreement. So in 2016, 180 states signed on to it and submitted pledges, and they all agreed to keep temperatures below 2 degrees and to achieve net zeros by the end of 2100. The United States decided, as part of its nationally determined contribution, to cut emissions to 26 to 28% below its 2005 level by 2025. However, this agreeing to make these cuts does impact on the United States' economic and political sovereignty, because it means that the US is forced to limit pollution, which impacts their industrial and developmental activities, which therefore will also impact on economic prosperity. So economic and political sovereignty is being impacted here. But the state reclaimed control. So in 2017, Donald Trump decided to leave the agreement, and his reasons for doing so was because of the economic reasons. So the state was here exercising legitimate control over their area because they were deciding to abolish and to abandon this agreement because it wasn't in the economic interest of the state. So this shows that issues requiring multilateral resolutions can challenge the state's sovereignty because it means that they need to adopt economic or political policies to align themselves with the to help fix the issue. However, the other side is that states can, though, reclaim their sovereignty and can decide to leave these agreements if they want, as seen with Donald Trump. So I hope that helps people with their knowledge on sovereignty and the 3 specific challenges to a state's sovereignty. It's also important to understand that our intergovernmental organizations, non-state actors, and transnational corporations can also challenge a state's sovereignty. So keep that in mind when you are revising for this area of study. I hope though that these videos were helpful, and I hope I see you again soon.